The blood-red sun dipped behind the distant mountains as Olivia Jameson clutched her worn leather journal to her chest, her stagecoach finally rolling into Wood River, Nebraska, after 3 grueling days of travel. The year was 1876, and at 21 years old, she had never ventured more than 10 miles from her family's Pennsylvania home until now. Wood River, final stop, the driver called, his voice cutting through the dusty evening air. Olivia gathered her skirts and stepped carefully onto the weathered wooden platform. The small frontier town stretched before her, a single dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, their facades bleached by years of harsh sun. A lone horseman passed, tipping his hat as he noticed her standing alone with her 2 modest traveling trunks. "Miss, you need assistance?" asked an elderly station master, his face weathered like tanned leather. "I'm looking for my uncle's homestead," Olivia replied, pulling a creased letter from her reticule. "Jacob Prescott, I believe his property is just outside town." The station master's face softened. "Old Jake's niece, are ya? Heard you might be coming." His expression fell slightly. "I'm mighty sorry, miss. Your uncle passed 2 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quick." Olivia felt her knees weaken. Uncle Jacob, her only remaining family after the fever took her parents, was gone, and with him, her last hope for a home. "There's a boarding house down the street," the station master offered kindly. "Mrs. Wilson is a good woman. She'll put you up until you sort things out." With trembling hands, Olivia paid for a room at the modest boarding house, using precious dollars from her dwindling savings. As night fell, she sat on the narrow bed, her future as uncertain as the vast Nebraska prairie stretching beyond her window. Morning came with harsh sunlight streaming through thin curtains. Olivia dressed in her plainest dress, navy blue cotton with small white dots, and made her way downstairs where Mrs. Wilson, a plump woman with kind eyes, served a simple breakfast of corn porridge. "Looking for work, are you?" Mrs. Wilson asked, refilling Olivia's cup with chicory coffee. "I must," Olivia admitted. "I trained as a teacher in Pennsylvania, but I'll take any respectable position." Mrs. Wilson's face brightened. "Providence. The schoolteacher position's been vacant 3 months now. Town council's been desperate to fill it." By midday, Olivia stood before 5 stern-faced men who comprised Wood River's town council, her teaching credentials from Pennsylvania clutched in her trembling hands. "Miss Jameson," began the mayor, a portly man with an impressive mustache, "we're in dire need of education for our children. 28 students, ages 6 to 16, haven't had proper schooling since Miss Abernathy left to marry." "I'm well qualified," Olivia assured them. "I completed the full teacher's course in Philadelphia and taught for 1 year in a countryside school." The council exchanged glances. "The position pays $30 monthly," the mayor continued. "Includes the small house behind the schoolhouse. It's modest but private." Olivia's heart leapt. A house of her own, even a small one, meant independence she'd never known. "There's one condition," added an older councilman with spectacles perched on his nose. "The teacher must maintain impeccable moral character. This town values propriety, Miss Jameson." "Of course," Olivia nodded solemnly. "I assure you, gentlemen, my conduct has always been above reproach." By evening, Olivia had signed a contract and received keys to both the schoolhouse and the small teacher's cottage behind it. The cottage was indeed modest, just 1 room with a small attached kitchen, but it was clean and contained simple furnishings. A narrow bed, a writing desk, a rocking chair, and a small dining table with 2 chairs. As she unpacked her few possessions, Olivia felt both terror and exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she answered to no one but herself. The following day brought her first challenge. After spending the morning cleaning the schoolhouse and organizing books, she realized she needed supplies. With a carefully written list, she made her way to the general store. The bell jingled as she entered the mercantile, the rich scents of leather, coffee beans, and tobacco filling her nostrils. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood behind the counter, deep in conversation with another customer. "Just need a few more days, Ethan," the customer was saying, his voice strained with worry. "The crops ain't selling for what they should." "Take what you need, Sam," replied the shopkeeper. "Your family's got to eat." The worried farmer nodded gratefully before noticing Olivia. He tipped his hat and hurried past her into the street. "Welcome," said the shopkeeper, turning his attention to her. "You must be our new schoolteacher." His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that suggested he wasn't Nebraska-born. Olivia looked up and up further to meet his eyes. They were startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, crinkled at the corners as if he smiled often. "Yes, I'm Olivia Jameson," she replied, extending her hand formally. "Ethan Tucker," he answered, taking her hand briefly. His palm was calloused, warm against her skin. "Proprietor of this establishment, though I also run cattle on my spread outside town." "A shopkeeper and a cowboy?" Olivia asked, unable to hide her curiosity. A smile curved his mouth beneath a neatly trimmed mustache. "In these parts, Miss Jameson, most folks wear multiple hats. The store pays steady, but the ranch is my true calling." As Ethan gathered the items on her list, chalk, paper, pencils, and a new wash basin for the schoolhouse, Olivia found herself studying him surreptitiously. His movements were economical, graceful despite his imposing size. Unlike many of the rough men she'd glimpsed around town, he was clean-shaven save for his mustache, his dark hair neatly trimmed at the collar. "Starting classes soon?" he asked, wrapping the chalk carefully in paper. "Monday next," she replied. "I've much preparation to do before then." 28 students, Ethan said, nodding. "Ages 6 to 16 last I heard. Good kids mostly, though the Harper boys might give you trouble." Olivia lifted her chin. "I'm prepared for discipline challenges, Mr. Tucker." Something in her tone made him glance up, amusement dancing in his eyes. "I don't doubt it, Miss Jameson." He tied the packages with twine and tallied the cost. "That'll be $3.42. As Olivia counted out the money from the advance the town council had provided, Ethan added, "There's a box social at the church Saturday evening. Whole town attends. Might be a good way for you to meet the families of your students." Olivia hesitated. In Philadelphia, she'd avoided social gatherings where young men might seek her attention. Her rejection of suitors had earned her a reputation for being standoffish, but she had her reasons she'd never shared with another soul. "Thank you for the information," she said noncommittally. Ethan Tucker smiled as if he understood her reticence. "Town's small, Miss Jameson. Folks will be curious about you either way." He handed her the packages. "These are heavy. Let me carry them to the schoolhouse for you." "That's not necessary," she began. "I insist," he said, already coming around the counter. He called to a young man sorting inventory. "Billy, mind the store for half an hour." Before she could protest further, Ethan had gathered her purchases and held the door open, waiting expectantly. Sighing inwardly at her inability to refuse without seeming ungracious, Olivia preceded him into the street. They walked in silence for several moments, Ethan shortening his long strides to match her pace. "What brings you to Wood River?" he finally asked. "Most newcomers are passing through to Oregon or California." "My uncle," she replied, finding no reason to hide the truth. "Jacob Prescott. I came to live with him but learned upon arrival that he'd passed away." Ethan's expression sobered. "Jake was a good man. Lost his wife years back but never stopped missing her." Are you planning to claim his homestead? Olivia shook her head. I wouldn't know the first thing about farming, and I understand there's still a mortgage owing. No, the teaching position is Providence. They reached the schoolhouse, a simple white painted building with a small bell tower. Ethan waited as she unlocked the door, then carried the packages inside, placing them on her desk. If you need anything else, Miss Jameson, he said, his voice echoing slightly in the empty schoolroom. My store's open 6 days a week. Sundays accepted, of course. Thank you, Mr. Tucker, Olivia replied formally, maintaining a careful distance between them. He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. That box social, he said, turning back. Ladies bring food baskets for auction. Proceeds go to church repairs. Men bid on baskets without knowing which lady prepared which meal. I understand the concept, Mr. Tucker, Olivia said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. His eyes crinkled with that same amusement. Just thought you might want to know that schoolteacher baskets traditionally fetch the highest bids. With that parting comment, he was gone, leaving Olivia wondering what exactly he was implying. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. After spending the day scrubbing the schoolhouse floor and arranging desks, Olivia reluctantly prepared for the box social. She had initially planned to avoid it, but Mrs. Wilson had insisted her absence would be noted and might offend the parents of her future students. She chose her second-best dress, a forest green cotton with ivory lace at the collar and cuffs, and pinned her chestnut hair into a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. Her basket contained fried chicken, cornbread, and apple tarts she'd baked in the small stove of her cottage. The church was already crowded when she arrived, lanterns casting a warm glow over the gathering. Women clustered on one side, men on the other, with children darting between groups. Olivia recognized a few faces from her brief time in town: the mayor, the station master, Mrs. Wilson, and Ethan Tucker, standing tall among a group of men, his usual store attire replaced by a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and string tie. When his eyes met hers across the room, he nodded in greeting. Miss Jameson, called the minister's wife, a slender woman with prematurely gray hair. Do come join us. Everyone's eager to meet you. For the next half hour, Olivia was introduced to so many people she despaired of remembering all their names. Mothers proudly presented children who would be her students, fathers inquired about her teaching philosophy, and several young, unmarried men hovered nearby, clearly interested in the new arrival. Time for the basket auction, announced the minister, a jovial man with a booming voice. Ladies, please bring your baskets forward. Olivia placed her basket among 24 others on a long table. Each was decorated differently, hers with a simple green ribbon matching her dress. The bidding began, with the minister acting as auctioneer. Baskets sold for anywhere from 50 cents to $3, depending on the perceived cooking skills of the lady in question and the enthusiasm of her suitors. When Olivia's basket came up for auction, she felt her cheeks warm as several men began bidding immediately. $1, called a young rancher she'd been introduced to earlier. $1.50, countered the blacksmith's son. The bidding continued, rising steadily to $4, an unprecedented amount. Just as the minister prepared to close the bidding, a deep voice from the back called, $5. Heads turned to see Ethan Tucker, arms crossed over his chest, expression unreadable. $5, exclaimed the minister. My goodness, that's a record for our little social. Any other bids? No. Sold to Mr. Tucker. Tradition dictated that Olivia now share her meal with the successful bidder. With forced composure, she made her way to where Ethan waited, basket in hand. Shall we find a table, Miss Jameson? He asked politely, gesturing toward the churchyard where several small tables had been set up. They settled at a table slightly apart from the others. As Olivia unpacked the food, she said quietly, "That was an excessive bid, Mr. Tucker." "Worth every penny if your cooking matches your other accomplishments," he replied, his tone light. "You know nothing of my accomplishments," she countered, serving him a piece of chicken. Ethan sampled it appreciatively before answering. "I know you traveled across half the country alone, secured employment within a day of arrival, and already have the schoolhouse shining like new." His blue eyes met hers directly. "I'd call those accomplishments." Olivia found herself momentarily speechless. Most men of her acquaintance had never noticed, much less acknowledged her capabilities. "The chicken is excellent," he continued, changing the subject. "My own cooking runs to coffee strong enough to dissolve spoons and beans heated over campfires." Despite herself, Olivia smiled. "A bachelor's diet, indeed." He broke a piece of cornbread. "Though not by choice entirely. Hard to court properly when your nearest neighbors are miles apart." Olivia felt a flash of panic at the turn in conversation. "I understand the ranching life is demanding," she said, deliberately redirecting. "How many cattle do you run?" Ethan allowed the change of subject, speaking of his ranch, 300 acres with a modest herd of Herefords, and his dreams of expansion. Olivia found herself genuinely interested in his description of ranch operations and his obvious love for the land. "Your store must suffer when you're attending to ranch business," she observed. "My sister Martha handles it 3 days a week," he explained. "She's a widow with 2 young children. The arrangement works well for both of us." As the evening progressed, Olivia reluctantly admitted to herself that she enjoyed Ethan Tucker's company. Unlike many men she'd encountered, he listened when she spoke and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts on education and literature. When the gathering began to disperse, Ethan insisted on walking her to her cottage. "It's unnecessary," Olivia protested. "It's only just behind the schoolhouse." "Humor me," Ethan said, falling into step beside her. "My mother would haunt me from the grave if I let a lady walk home unescorted after dark." They walked in companionable silence for several minutes, the only sound their footsteps and the distant laughter of children still playing in the churchyard. "Thank you for the meal," Ethan said as they reached her door. "Best $5 I've spent in Wood River." Olivia felt a strange flutter in her chest at his words. "You're welcome, Mr. Tucker, though I still think the bid was excessive." He smiled, the moonlight illuminating his face. For a moment, Olivia thought he might say something more, perhaps even take her hand. Instead, he touched his hat brim. "Good night, Miss Jameson. I look forward to hearing how your first day of school proceeds." "Good night," she replied, quickly stepping inside and closing the door. Leaning against it, Olivia released a shaky breath. What was wrong with her? Ethan Tucker was merely being kind to a newcomer, nothing more. And even if his interest ran deeper, she could never reciprocate. Not with her secret weighing so heavily. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. Olivia rang the school bell at precisely 8 o'clock, watching as children of all ages made their way into the schoolhouse. By 8:30, 26 students occupied the desks, arranged by age with the youngest in front. "Good morning," Olivia said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I am Miss Jameson, your new teacher." 26 pairs of eyes stared back at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Before we begin our lessons," she continued, "I'd like each of you to stand, state your name and age, and tell me one thing you hope to learn this year." The process of introduction took nearly an hour, during which Olivia learned that her students' educational needs varied dramatically. Some of the older boys could barely read, while a few of the younger children already showed advanced aptitude. The Harper boys, 13-year-old twins with identical mischievous expressions, were clearly going to be challenging, just as Ethan had predicted. By noon, Olivia had conducted preliminary reading assessments and begun organizing students into learning groups. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, she sank into her chair, already exhausted. A knock at the door made her look up. Ethan Tucker stood there holding a covered basket. "Thought you might need sustenance," he said, entering at her gesture. "First day with 28 students can't be easy." 26, Olivia corrected automatically. "The Richardson children haven't arrived." "And no, it's not easy, but it's rewarding already." She eyed the basket. "What's this?" "Lunch," he replied, placing it on her desk. "Mrs. Peterson from the cafe packed it. Said new teachers often forget to eat their first day." Touched by the thoughtfulness, Olivia opened the basket to find a hearty sandwich, an apple, and a jar of lemonade. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I did indeed forget to pack anything." Ethan leaned against a nearby desk. "How are the Harper boys behaving?" "Testing boundaries," Olivia admitted, biting into the sandwich. "Nothing I haven't handled before," he nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Their father's a good man but works from dawn till dusk. Their mother died 3 years ago, so they've run a bit wild." "Many of these children have experienced loss," Olivia observed. "In the introductions, I counted 7 who mentioned deceased parents." "Frontier life is hard," Ethan agreed soberly. "Disease, accidents, childbirth. Many don't survive." They were interrupted by the school bell rung by the student Olivia had assigned to timekeeper duty. "I should go," Ethan said, straightening. "Just wanted to ensure you were faring well." "I appreciate the consideration," Olivia replied, genuinely grateful. As he turned to leave, he added, "My sister's 2 children, Emma and David, speak highly of you already. That's no small accomplishment after just one morning." With that, he was gone, leaving Olivia to wonder why his approval meant so much to her. The weeks passed quickly as autumn deepened toward winter. Olivia found her rhythm as a teacher, developing a reputation for firmness tempered with kindness. Even the Harper twins began to show improvement in both behavior and academics when she discovered their hidden aptitude for mathematics and put them in charge of the younger children's arithmetic drills. Her encounters with Ethan Tucker became a regular occurrence. He often stopped by the schoolhouse after classes with small gifts, a book for her classroom library, a jar of honey from his ranch, once even a pot of chrysanthemums to brighten her desk. Each gesture was presented casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Olivia told herself she accepted these tokens merely to avoid rudeness, but in truth, she found herself looking forward to his visits. Their conversations ranged from town gossip to literature to politics. Ethan surprised her with his progressive views on women's suffrage and education. "My mother was educated at Mount Holyoke before she married my father and came west," he explained one afternoon as they walked from the schoolhouse to his store. "She never regretted her choice, but always said education was the one true path to freedom." "A wise woman," Olivia replied, thinking of her own mother who had insisted on her daughter's education despite limited means. "She would have liked you," Ethan said simply. The statement, delivered without artifice, caused warmth to bloom in Olivia's chest. She quickly changed the subject to safer territory. As Thanksgiving approached, the townsfolk began preparations for a community feast to be held in the church hall. Olivia found herself on the decoration committee alongside Martha Tucker, Ethan's sister. Martha proved to be as straightforward as her brother, with the same startling blue eyes and direct manner. As they crafted paper ornaments for the tables, She spoke candidly. "My brother thinks highly of you," she said, cutting a paper cornucopia with practiced precision. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Tucker has been very kind to me as a newcomer," Martha laughed. "Ethan's kind to everyone, but he doesn't bring honey and flowers to Mrs. Wilson or the blacksmith's wife." "I'm sure I don't know what you're implying," Olivia said stiffly. The other woman sighed. "I'm not implying anything, Miss Jameson. I'm stating plainly that my brother shows particular attention to you, and I'm wondering if you've noticed." Olivia focused intently on the paper leaves she was cutting. "I've noticed his generosity," she admitted. "And?" Martha prompted. "And nothing," Olivia replied firmly. "I am a teacher. My position requires exemplary conduct. I cannot engage in courtship," Martha supplied, raising an eyebrow precisely. Olivia set down her scissors. "The school board made it very clear that the teacher must maintain impeccable moral character." "Being courted hardly violates moral character," Martha pointed out. "Unless there's another reason you're avoiding my brother's attentions." Olivia stood abruptly. "I should check on the children's artwork for the celebration," she said, gathering her materials. "Please excuse me." As she hurried away, Olivia knew her reaction had only confirmed Martha's suspicions. But what could she say? That despite her growing feelings for Ethan Tucker, she could never allow herself to act on them. That her secret would make any relationship impossible. The Thanksgiving celebration arrived with a blanket of early snow covering Wood River. The church hall was filled with delicious aromas as families brought their contributions to the feast. Olivia had baked 3 pumpkin pies, using a precious tin of spices she'd ordered from Omaha. She was arranging her pies on the dessert table when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Those look dangerous to a man's waistline," Ethan said, his breath forming a small cloud in the chilly hall. Olivia turned, finding him closer than expected. He wore a dark suit with a brocade vest, finer clothes than she'd seen him in before. The effect was undeniably handsome. "Family recipe," she managed to say. "My mother swore the secret was in the molasses." "I'll be certain to claim a slice," he promised. Then, more softly, "You look lovely today, Olivia." It was the first time he'd used her given name. Something in his tone made her breath catch. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. The moment was broken as the minister called everyone to be seated. The long tables were arranged in rows with families sitting together. Olivia found herself at the unmarried persons table alongside several other single adults from the community. To her surprise and secret pleasure, Ethan joined their table, taking the empty seat beside her. Throughout the meal, they conversed easily, joined occasionally by others at their table. When his hand accidentally brushed hers while reaching for the salt, Olivia felt the contact like a spark of electricity. After the feast, as the gathering transitioned to music and conversation, Ethan leaned close. "Would you walk with me?" he asked quietly. "There's something I'd like to discuss." Alarm bells rang in Olivia's mind, but curiosity and something deeper won out. "Let me get my shawl," she agreed. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the afternoon sun created a glittering landscape. They walked in silence for several minutes, their breaths forming clouds in the crisp air. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I've been direct about most things in my life, Olivia. I see no reason to change now." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've developed feelings for you, strong feelings, and I believe you might share them." Olivia felt panic rising in her chest. "Ethan, please," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. I know you're cautious. I respect that. I'm not asking for promises today. I'm asking permission to court you properly." His blue eyes held such sincerity that Olivia felt tears threatening. How simple it would be to say yes, to allow herself this chance at happiness. But she couldn't, not with her secret hanging between them like an invisible wall. "I can't," she whispered, the words painful in her throat. Hurt flashed across his features before being carefully masked. "May I ask why? It's complicated," she said, unable to meet his gaze. "Is there someone else?" he asked quietly. "Someone back in Pennsylvania?" "No." The denial came quickly, forcefully. "Then what?" Ethan pressed, taking her gloved hand in his. "Whatever it is, Olivia, we can face it together." She pulled her hand away, stepping back. "You don't understand." "Help me understand," he urged. Olivia shook her head, tears now flowing freely. "I can't. Please don't ask again." Before he could respond, she turned and hurried back toward the church, leaving him standing alone in the snow. The weeks following Thanksgiving were difficult for Olivia. Ethan respected her wishes, no longer bringing small gifts or stopping by the schoolhouse. When their paths crossed in town, he was unfailingly polite, but maintained a careful distance that both relieved and saddened her. Christmas approached, bringing excitement to her students and a flurry of holiday preparations. The children practiced carols for their Christmas program, created handmade gifts for their families, and decorated the schoolhouse with paper chains and pine boughs. On the last day before the holiday break, parents filled the schoolroom to watch their children perform. Olivia stood proudly as even the most reluctant students recited poems or sang songs. The Harper twins surprised everyone with a perfectly executed mathematical demonstration using Christmas candies. After the program, as families mingled and enjoyed cider and cookies, Olivia noticed Ethan standing near the back with his sister and her children. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. Martha approached her while the children played a game in the corner. "My brother is miserable," she said without preamble. Olivia sighed. "I'm sorry for that, truly, but it's better this way." "Is it?" Martha challenged. "Because you seem equally unhappy." "Sometimes happiness isn't possible," Olivia replied softly. Martha studied her for a long moment. "Whatever your secret is, Miss Jameson, I doubt it's as insurmountable as you believe." Before Olivia could respond, Martha rejoined her family, leaving her with uncomfortable thoughts. Christmas passed quietly for Olivia. Several families invited her to join their celebrations, but she declined politely, preferring solitude with her thoughts. On Christmas morning, she discovered a package on her doorstep, a beautiful leather-bound copy of Jane Eyre with no card attached. She knew immediately who had left it. The new year brought bitter cold and heavy snow to Nebraska. School resumed with students bundled in layers, the schoolhouse heated by a temperamental stove that Olivia struggled to keep burning consistently. One particularly frigid morning in late January, she arrived early to find the schoolhouse already warm, the stove blazing cheerfully. Ethan Tucker stood beside it, adding another log. "The lock was frozen," he explained, straightening as she entered. "I took the liberty of starting the fire. Wouldn't want the children sitting in the cold." "Thank you," Olivia said, removing her heavy coat and gloves. "That was thoughtful." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken words. "I should go," Ethan said finally. "Store opens at 8. As he moved toward the door, Olivia called, "Thank you for the book. It's one of my favorites." He paused, a small smile touching his lips. "I remembered you mentioning it once." Then, more seriously, "I miss our conversations, Olivia." The simple admission pierced her heart. "I miss them too," she confessed. Hope flickered in his eyes. "Then perhaps, but nothing has changed," she added quickly, hating herself for the pain that replaced his hope. He nodded once, his face carefully neutral. "If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." With that, he was gone, leaving only the warmth of the fire as evidence of his presence. That evening, alone in her cottage, Olivia pulled out her journal and wrote the words she'd never spoken aloud to another soul. I am 21 years old and have never been touched by a man. Not in love, not in passion. I have refused all suitors because the truth would repulse them. How can I tell Ethan that at 15 I fell ill with smallpox, that while I survived, my body bears the scars that no proper lady would show before marriage? That any man who married me would discover on our wedding night that his bride's body is a map of pitted scars from neck to knees. Better to remain alone than to face rejection after vows have been spoken. Weeks passed with the slow rhythm of winter. February brought Valentine's Day, which Olivia acknowledged in class with paper heart crafts, but otherwise ignored. Several unmarried men in town sent her cards or small gifts, which she accepted graciously but without encouragement. Nothing came from Ethan. March arrived with thawing snow and mud-choked streets. The first signs of spring brought renewed energy to her students and a restlessness to Olivia herself. She found herself walking along Wood River in the evenings, watching the ice break up and the waters swell with snowmelt. It was during one such walk that disaster struck. A sudden cry drew her attention to the river's edge where two small boys, she recognized them, as 8-year-old twins from her school had ventured onto what appeared to be solid ice. As she watched in horror, the ice cracked, plunging one boy into the frigid water. Without thinking, Olivia ran toward them, calling out to the boy still on solid ground to stay back. She waded into the shallows, the icy water soaking her skirts, reaching for the flailing child. Her fingers grasped his coat, just as the current threatened to pull him under, but the sodden weight of both the boy and her water-logged clothing made progress back to shore nearly impossible. The freezing water numbed her legs as she struggled, managing only to keep the child's head above water. "Help!" she screamed, her voice thin in the cold air. "Someone help us!" Just as her strength began to fail, strong arms plunged into the water beside her. Ethan Tucker, his face grim with determination, seized the boy and lifted him free of the water. "I've got him," he said tersely. "Get yourself to shore." Together they struggled back to solid ground, where the second twin stood crying in fear. Ethan laid the soaked boy on the bank and quickly checked his breathing. "He's all right," he announced, relief evident in his voice. "Cold and frightened, but all right." Olivia sank to her knees, suddenly aware of how cold she was. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as reaction set in. "You're freezing," Ethan said, shrugging out of his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Can you walk? My ranch house is closest." She tried to stand but found her legs uncooperative. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped her into his arms. "I'll take both boys," he said. "James, can you walk alongside me? We need to get your brother warm quickly." The frightened twin nodded, and Ethan set off at a brisk pace, carrying Olivia and the soaked boy with apparent ease. His ranch house appeared within minutes, a substantial log structure with smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, a housekeeper exclaimed in alarm at the sight of them. "Mrs. Finch, we need dry clothes and hot tea," Ethan instructed, setting Olivia carefully on a chair near the fire. "These children need warming, and Miss Jameson fell into the river rescuing young Peter here." What followed was a flurry of activity. The boys were taken to a back room to be dried and dressed in some of Ethan's old shirts, while their clothes were hung by the fire. Mrs. Finch provided Olivia with a flannel nightgown and thick woolen robe, turning a corner of the main room into a makeshift changing area with hung blankets for privacy. As Olivia peeled off her sodden clothing, she realized with horror that the white cotton of her chemise and drawers had become nearly transparent with moisture. Had Ethan noticed? The thought made her flush despite her chilled state. once changed and wrapped in blankets before the fire, a cup of hot tea warming her hands, Olivia began to feel human again. The boys, similarly bundled and drinking hot cocoa, had recovered their spirits enough to recount their adventure with dramatic embellishments. "Miss Jameson saved me," Peter declared. "She was like an angel in the water." "A very foolish angel," Ethan remarked, though his tone held no censure. "That current could have taken you both." "I couldn't stand by and watch him drown," Olivia said simply. Ethan's eyes met hers, something unreadable in their blue depths. "No," he agreed softly. "You couldn't." Mrs. Finch took the boys to the kitchen for sandwiches, leaving Olivia and Ethan alone by the fire. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "If you hadn't come along—" "I was checking fence lines," he explained. "Heard screaming." His expression grew serious. "You could have died, Olivia." "So could Peter," she countered. Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "That's not the point. You put yourself at risk without thought." "As did you," she pointed out. He sighed, the fight leaving him. "I suppose we're both stubborn that way." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Olivia became acutely aware of her state, wearing borrowed clothes in a bachelor's home, her hair loose and damp around her shoulders. The impropriety would scandalize the town council. "I should return to town," she said, though the thought of leaving the warm fire was unappealing. "Your clothes are still soaked," Ethan replied practically. "And it'll be dark soon. I've sent word to town with one of my ranch hands explaining the situation. Mrs. Finch will chaperone, of course. The boys can sleep in the spare room, and you can take my sister's room. She keeps it ready for when she visits with the children." His thoughtfulness touched her. "You've considered everything." "I try to," he said with a slight smile. Later, after a simple but hearty supper, the boys were tucked into bed, their parents notified of their safety. Olivia found herself once more by the fire with Ethan, Mrs. Finch knitting discreetly in a corner to maintain propriety. "Will your clothes be ready by morning?" Ethan asked, poking at the fire. "I believe so," Olivia replied. "The skirt may still be damp, but wearable." Ethan nodded, seemingly lost in thought. Finally, he spoke, his voice low enough that Mrs. Finch couldn't overhear. "I've respected your wishes, Olivia. I haven't pressed you about your reasons for rejecting my suit." Olivia tensed, clutching her blanket tighter. "But today," he continued, "when I saw you in that river, I realized that some things can't remain unspoken." His blue eyes held hers intently. "I love you. I believe I have since the moment you walked into my store with your list of school supplies." Olivia's heart pounded painfully against her ribs. "Ethan, please don't let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking for your answer tonight. I'm only asking that you consider that whatever stands between us might not be as important as what could be." Tears pricked at her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then help me understand," he urged, leaning forward. "Whatever it is, Olivia, it doesn't change how I feel." A log shifted in the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. In that moment, looking into Ethan's earnest face, Olivia made a decision. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "after the boys are returned home, I'll try to explain." Relief washed over his features. "That's all I ask." Morning came with sunshine streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, Olivia was disoriented before remembering the events of the previous day. Her clothes, now dry, had been laid out for her, and the smell of coffee and frying bacon drifted under the door. She dressed quickly, noting with relief that while her skirt was rumpled, it was wearable. Her hair was another matter without her usual pins and combs. She could only brush it and tie it back with a ribbon Mrs. Finch had provided. In the kitchen, she found the twins already eating breakfast, seemingly recovered from their ordeal and chattering excitedly about sleeping in a real cowboy's house. Ethan sat with them, answering their rapid-fire questions about ranch life with patient amusement. He looked up as she entered, his smile warming his entire face. "Good morning. I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Olivia replied, suddenly shy under his gaze. After breakfast, Ethan hitched a wagon to drive them all back to town. The boys sat in the back, still wrapped in blankets against the morning chill, while Olivia sat beside Ethan on the wooden seat. They traveled mostly in silence, each lost in thought. Olivia's mind raced with anxiety about the conversation to come. How could she possibly explain? What words could make him understand without driving him away in disgust in town? They delivered the boys to their tearfully grateful parents before continuing to the schoolhouse. "Would you like to change clothes before we talk?" Ethan asked considerately as he helped her down from the wagon. Olivia nodded gratefully. "Yes, please. Perhaps. Could you return in an hour? I'll be here," he promised. Exactly 1 hour later, a knock sounded at her cottage door. Olivia had changed into a fresh dress, a simple blue cotton, and tidied her hair. Her hands trembled as she opened the door to find Ethan waiting patiently, hat in hand. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The cottage suddenly seemed smaller with his presence filling it. Olivia gestured to the small table where she'd set out tea, more for something to occupy her hands than from any real desire for refreshment. They sat across from each other, an expectant silence stretching between them. "I don't know how to begin," Olivia admitted finally. "However you need to," Ethan replied, his voice gentle. She took a deep breath, staring into her teacup as if it might provide courage. "When I was 15, she began, "there was an outbreak of smallpox in our community. Many died. I survived, but—" Her voice faltered. Ethan waited patiently, not pressing. "The disease left its mark on me," she continued, each word an effort. "My face was spared mercifully, but my body. From neck to knees I bear the scars." Understanding dawned in his eyes, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I've never—" Olivia swallowed hard. "I've never allowed any man to court me because I couldn't bear the thought of what would happen after marriage, when a husband would discover that his bride is marked in such a way." Tears spilled onto her cheeks. "I couldn't bear your rejection, Ethan. Not after vows were spoken. Better to end it now before it begins." For a long moment, Ethan sat motionless, absorbing her words. Then slowly he reached across the table and took her hand in his. "Olivia," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "do you think so little of me? That I would love you less because of scars?" "You don't understand," she insisted. They're not. They're not subtle, they're deep and numerous." "No man would want I want you," Ethan interrupted firmly. Scars and all. Fresh tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "You say that now, but I say it now, and I'll say it every day for the rest of our lives if you'll let me," Ethan vowed. He rose from his chair and knelt beside hers, still holding her hand. "Olivia Jameson, I love you for your mind, your spirit, your courage. I love how you face life head-on, how you care for your students, how you jumped into a freezing river to save a child without thought for yourself." He reached up to brush tears from her cheek. "Your scars are proof of your strength, that you faced death and won. How could I possibly love you less for that?" Olivia looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of insincerity but finding only earnest devotion. "I've never been touched," she confessed in a whisper. Not in that way." Ethan's expression softened further. "Then let me be your first," he said gently. "And your last. Be my wife, Olivia. Let me spend my life showing you that you are beautiful to me exactly as you are." For the first time in years, hope bloomed in Olivia's chest, fragile but undeniable. "You truly mean that?" With all my heart, Ethan affirmed. Hesitantly, Olivia leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan's smile was radiant as he drew her into a gentle embrace, his lips finding hers in a tender first kiss that promised many more to come. Spring arrived in earnest as April brought green shoots and wildflowers to the Nebraska prairie. Wood River buzzed with news of the engagement between the schoolteacher and the rancher shopkeeper. Some expressed surprise at the match, but those who knew them well merely nodded with satisfaction that the two had finally acknowledged what had been obvious to everyone else. The town council initially expressed concern about losing their teacher, but Olivia assured them she would complete the school year. After that, arrangements would be made for her replacement. Perhaps she might even continue teaching part-time once she was settled as Mrs. Tucker. Martha Tucker embraced Olivia warmly upon hearing the news. I knew whatever stood between you couldn't possibly be as insurmountable as you believed, she said with sisterly affection. The wedding was planned for early June, after the school term ended. Preparations kept Olivia busy, but her happiest moments were the evenings spent with Ethan, walking along the river or sitting on her cottage porch, planning their future together. I've been expanding the ranch house, Ethan told her one evening as they watched the sunset. Added 2 more bedrooms and enlarged the kitchen. Thought perhaps someday we might fill those rooms with children. Olivia blushed at the implication but smiled. I'd like that, she admitted, though I'm still nervous about our wedding night. Ethan took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. We'll take all the time you need, he assured her. There's no rush, Olivia, we have our whole lives ahead of us. His patience and understanding only deepened her love for him. Each day, she marveled at how fortunate she was to have found a man who saw beyond her scars to the woman beneath. June arrived with perfect weather for a wedding. The ceremony was held in the church, filled to capacity with townsfolk and ranchers from the surrounding area. Olivia wore a simple white dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, her hair adorned with wildflowers. As she walked down the aisle on the arm of the mayor standing in for her late father, Olivia's eyes fixed on Ethan waiting at the altar. His face glowed with love and pride, his blue eyes never leaving hers as she approached. The minister spoke the traditional words, and they exchanged vows with clear, steady voices. When Ethan slipped the gold band onto her finger, a band he'd ordered specially from Omaha, Olivia felt a sense of rightness and belonging she'd never experienced before. I now pronounce you husband and wife, declared the minister. You may kiss your bride. Ethan's kiss was tender but held a promise of passion that made Olivia's cheeks flush with anticipation rather than fear. The celebration afterward was joyous tables laden with food, music from fiddles and harmonicas, children playing games while adults danced and conversed. As evening approached, the newlyweds slipped away to begin their married life at Ethan's ranch, now their shared home. The drive was quiet, both lost in thoughts of the step they were about to take. When they arrived, Ethan helped Olivia down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Tucker," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the front room. The house was transformed, fresh curtains hung at the windows, new rugs covered the wooden floors, and vases of wildflowers adorned every surface. Olivia recognized Martha's touch in the feminine details that softened the previously bachelor quarters. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Not as beautiful as you," Ethan replied, drawing her into his arms. As darkness fell, the moment Olivia had both anticipated and dreaded approached. Ethan sensed her tension and led her to the sofa before the fire, pulling her gently onto his lap. "We don't have to do anything tonight," he murmured against her hair. "We can just hold each other." His consideration brought tears to her eyes. "I want to," she said softly. "I'm just afraid of what, my love, that you'll be disappointed, that when you see me you'll regret your choice." Ethan tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. "Olivia Tucker, the only regret I could possibly have is if I never got to love you completely." His eyes held hers intently. "But if you're not ready, I'll wait. Days, weeks, months, whatever you need." In that moment, looking into his loving eyes, Olivia's fears receded. This was her Ethan who had proven his love in countless ways, who had seen her strength and her vulnerability and loved her for both. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I want to be your wife in every way." Ethan's kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, yet still controlled. He lifted her in his arms again and carried her to their bedroom, where a large 4-poster bed dominated the space. Setting her on her feet, he lit a single lamp, keeping the flame low. "I want to see you," he explained gently. "All of you, but only when you're ready." Olivia's hands trembled as she reached for the buttons at her throat. "Help me," she asked softly. With infinite tenderness, Ethan began unfastening her wedding dress, his fingers certain but unhurried. When the dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet, he helped her step free of it, leaving her in her chemise and petticoats. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. Olivia steeled herself as he continued helping with her layers of undergarments. When finally she stood before him in only her thin chemise, she took a deep, shuddering breath. "The scars," she said, her voice barely audible. "They're underneath." Ethan took her hands in his. "Olivia, look at me." When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, "Nothing you show me will change how I feel. Nothing." With trembling fingers, she slipped the chemise over her head and stood naked before her husband, resisting the urge to cover herself with her arms. The lamplight illuminated the network of pitted scars that traversed her torso, arms and thighs, the legacy of her battle with smallpox. For a long moment, Ethan simply looked at her, his expression one of tender awe. Then, slowly, he reached out to trace a particularly prominent scar just below her collarbone. "These are badges of honor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Proof of your courage and strength." He leaned forward to press his lips gently against the scar he'd touched. "Every mark tells me you fought to live, fought to become the woman I love." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, not from shame but from overwhelming relief and love. "You truly don't mind." Ethan shook his head, drawing her into his arms. "Olivia, I treasure them. Each scar is part of you, and I love every part." As he continued to show her with gentle touches and whispered words just how beautiful he found her, Olivia's fears melted away. When Ethan removed his own clothing and guided her to their marriage bed, she went willingly, eagerly. Their first joining was tender, Ethan's patience infinite as he introduced Olivia to pleasures she'd never imagined. When discomfort gave way to unexpected waves of sensation, she clung to him, astonished by the intensity of their connection. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Olivia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, his fingers drawing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I almost let fear rob me of this," she replied honestly. "Of you." He tightened his arms around her. "But you didn't. You were brave enough to take a chance on us." Olivia raised herself on one elbow to look into his beloved face. "I love you, Ethan Tucker, more than I thought it possible to love anyone." His smile was tender as he drew her down for a kiss. "And I love you, Olivia Tucker, scars and all." In the years that followed, their love only deepened. The ranch prospered under Ethan's careful management, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Olivia continued teaching part-time, focusing on adult education for those who'd missed schooling in their youth. Their first child, a son they named James after Ethan's father, was born a year after their wedding. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later. Both children inherited their father's blue eyes and their mother's determined spirit. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house watching their children play in the summer twilight, Ethan took Olivia's hand in his. "Any regrets?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, contentment filling her heart. "Only that I waited so long to trust you with my secret." "It was worth the wait," Ethan assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. As darkness fell over the Nebraska prairie, Olivia reflected on the journey from frightened, scarred girl to confident woman, wife, and mother. The physical marks remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were simply part of her story, a story of courage, perseverance, and ultimately, of love that saw beyond surface imperfections to the beauty within. In Ethan's arms, she had found not just acceptance but celebration of all that she was. And in that complete acceptance, Olivia had found a freedom more profound than she'd ever imagined possible, the freedom to be fully, unreservedly herself. "I love you," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "And I love you," Ethan replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always." As stars appeared in the vast Nebraska sky, Olivia Tucker, once afraid to be touched, rested securely in her husband's embrace, grateful for the cowboy who had seen her scars not as flaws but as testaments to her strength, the cowboy who had indeed been her first, and would be her only, love.